Malcolm Douglas. I'm now living in Sydney, the biggest and busiest city in Australia. But I'm really a bushman at heart, and as I cope with the traffic snarls and the congestion of this metropolis, I long for the lands far beyond the tangle of machines and men. During 1971, I spent months exploring the Kimberley coast on the extreme northwest of Australia. This little-known region, with its cliff-locked harbours, raging tides, fighting fish, and tribal aborigines, had a lasting impact on me, and for years, I longed to see this wilderness again. So during the early months of 1976, I decided to get my gear together, contact some old friends, and return again to the islands beyond the Kimberley coast. I left Sydney on the east coast and drove right across Australia, passing through Alice Springs in the centre, across the Tanami Desert, until I reached the Indian Ocean. And from here, I journeyed by boat to Montgomery Reef, off the extreme northwest coast of Australia. There are 5 of us altogether. Kim Allen from Adelaide, Tom Wigan and young Numya from the Bardi tribe, Sam Woolagudja, an elder of the Warura tribe, and of course, me and my pup Jardy. With the boat heavily laden, we work our way along the coast, choosing the times when the waters are calm and the tides favourable. Eventually, we reach a small island 30 kilometres from the mainland on the edge of Montgomery Reef. This will be our home over the coming weeks. Our first and most urgent job is to find water. And after digging a metre-deep hole, Kim tastes the wet sand to see if it's salty. We're in luck. The water is quite acceptable. This will save a long journey to the mainland to replenish supplies. Woolagudja tells us of a small tribe that camped here in the early days and how they found water in this way. When the water's left to settle in containers, it soon clears. Once our permanent camp is established, we construct a shelter to store equipment and film. And at last, I can settle into a lifestyle completely different to my city experience. The relentlessly rushing tides control all our movements. There are few places in the world where the currents travel with such speed. The tide surges in over the sand flats with an almost unbelievable momentum. And with the tide come the fish, and the sharks and the rays, an abundant supply of food for us all. With our spears and woomeras at the ready, we wade into the murky water and the hunt begins. We're after stingrays, a dangerous and very tricky operation, and we leap to avoid the poisonous barbs. A wound from one of these can be fatal. As soon as he gets the chance, Woolagudja knocks the poisonous barb from the base of the tail. And once this is done, the rays can be handled with safety. The Kimberley coastline is still one of the least known and most hazardous in all of Australia. It's no place for the inexperienced. For even today, it's still mainly uninhabited, and one mistake could lead to disaster. These turbulent waters have never really been fished, and it's still not known what varieties can be caught, either for sport or by the professional fishermen. However, the teeming seabirds indicate the numbers of fish that must be in the waters, so we follow the turns until they begin feeding. This is our cue to start trolling, for wherever there are big birds catching small fish at the surface, there are usually bigger fish hunting them below. Almost immediately, the action really gets going. We're amongst the Spanish mackerel. One after another, these fighting fish come over the side, the biggest ones weighing over 20 kilos. The large silver spoon is the best lure for these fish. When the mackerel finally stop biting, I put up our collapsible mast and sail. It's not exactly designed for a racing yacht, but it will get us out of trouble in an emergency. I maintain that all power boats in remote areas should have some type of auxiliary sail and a spare motor. At the edge of the mangroves, the giant mud crabs scuttle about, feeding on the rising tide. And it's just a matter of wading along and taking your pick. Cooked on the coals, there's nothing more delicious. Namya's ability to hunt improves daily, and he enjoys bringing in his share of the food. Small turtles moving too slowly off the reef are his favorite target, and he's able to run them down. Although anything bigger than this one, he'd never be able to handle. On certain islands near the reef, the turtles lay their eggs. Namya has recognized turtle tracks and is eager to find the nest. Turtle eggs are a favored food of the Aborigines, and they'll go to any lengths to get them. Namya detects a faint smell of yolk on the spear tip, and eagerly he begins to dig. The turtles camouflage their nests well with loose sand, and the eggs are found only by the experienced hunter. Turtles and their eggs are fully protected, but the Aborigines are exempt from these laws. The eggs are baked in the hot ashes, and as soon as they're ready, Woolagudja offers me one. Throw away the developing turtle, he indicates, and eat the remainder. Surprisingly, it's quite acceptable. Like a growing boy anywhere in the world, Namya has tons of energy, and he's always on the move exploring the island. This morning he's located an osprey's nest, and for a few minutes the young hawks tolerate the intruder. These fish-eating birds are now rare in many parts of the world. Fortunately, they're still plentiful along Australia's coastline, and they're a magnificent bird to watch. On every high tide, schools of fish skim across the reef to feed, swooping and darting after small particles of food. When the fish are active, so are we. Willard and Namya take over the trolling lines and revel in the sport as they haul in the fish. When Woolagudja was a boy, living along the coast, the only way that he could catch fish was to make a spear and stalk through the shallows. Now, as we motor around the same point time and time again, I can just see how much he's enjoying himself. In fact, he and Namya don't want to return to the camp until the late afternoon, when the shoals have left the reef on the dropping tide. We never waste any of our catch. Filleted and salted, it's left to dry in the sun. Small cuts made in the flesh are thoroughly rubbed with salt to absorb all the juices quickly. We'll eat the dried strips if we run out of fresh food, and if we don't, they'll be taken back to their families at the end of the trip. With a circumference of approximately 100 kilometers, Montgomery is a huge reef, much of it covered with coral. Fish hide under the coral ledges at low tide, and Tom is out after them. It takes a keen eye to notice a slight movement or a faint swirl of sand that suggests a fish. When the prey is spotted, the spear is driven home and Tom casually collects a meal. On a tropical reef, one would never starve. Millions of oysters cover the rocks, and it's just a matter of prying them free. Troca's shell was collected in the early days to make buttons. The white meat is best eaten raw, and as bush tucker goes, this is high on the list. This unlikely-looking fishing spot was shown to me by the Aborigines on one of my early trips to the coast. Wherever water lies on the reef at low tide, there are coral holes excavated by the frogfish, commonly called monkeyfish by the locals. An aggressive, big-mouthed variety, it's easily caught by simply dropping your baited hook down into the lair. These fish make a good meal and are so easily caught that the Aborigines use them as an emergency food supply when it's too stormy to collect food elsewhere. The popular belief in Australia is that coral is found only along the east coast. This is certainly not true. Montgomery Reef supports some of the most beautiful coral to be found anywhere. So much has been written about giant clams trapping unsuspecting divers that it's hard to separate fact from fantasy. However, there are many varieties of clam, some torpid in action, others snapping shut. An unlucky diver could be held captive by a large specimen. I've seen these clams up to 2 meters across. Sea snakes, more deadly than their land cousins, are numerous. This species is the biggest and one of the deadliest. Relatively slow moving, they're quite capable of killing an adult human. The best time to spear a feed on the reef is when the tide is beginning to rise and the fish are moving more freely. It's not unusual to see small sharks like this one cruising in very shallow water. And sharks this size are quite good eating. The most fascinating aspect of this reef are the phenomenal cascades that appear every time the tide drops. Nowhere else have I witnessed such a remarkable sight. It's caused when the tide drops faster than the huge volume of water on the reef can disperse, so that long after the ebb of the tide, it's still pouring over the edge. This gives a weird visual effect of the reef rising up from the ocean, a great shimmering rock dissected by deep channels and fringed with foaming cascades. By the time the waterfalls ease off, the tide is turning again. Green turtles often leave their run until late and make an undignified and comical dash for the open sea. This brilliant water display owes its existence to the extraordinarily high rise and fall of the tide on the Kimberley coast, as much as 6 meters, and that occurs twice a day. Along the edge of the reef, man-eaters cruise. Aggressive tiger sharks, grotesque hammerheads, swift whalers. Early one morning while we're fishing, we hook this giant. And no matter how hard we try, we can't lift more than its head out of the water. With no hope of pulling it into the boat, we tow it to the nearest beach to have a good look in detail. This is a tiger shark. Recognized as a dangerous man-eater, it's responsible for almost as many attacks on humans as the great white. This close-up gives you a dramatic view of the tearing and ripping capacity of these streamland killers. Tiger sharks are very common in Australian waters. Daily, we see many sharks, and most of the time they keep well away from us. But this hammerhead that Namya has just spotted is most interested in our presence, and for some minutes it circles our boat. A streamlined body slicing through the shallows, giving us a rare glimpse of grace and speed. And as silently, it cruises away to disappear in the murky blue distance. Montgomery Reef is the favoured feeding ground of thousands of turtles, and the turtle is the main source of food for the coastal Aborigines. The turtles come into the shallows to browse on the seaweed, moving across the reef on the rising tide. At the slightest hint of danger, they're off to the safety of the deeper channels. There is nothing that Tom enjoys more than a turtle hunt. At times, they can be speared, but there's a spice of danger and excitement as he leaps upon his prey and fights it to exhaustion. Eventually, manhandling it into the shallows. Although Tom is only a slight man to look at, it takes exceptional skill, strength and stamina to overpower these giant marine reptiles. And there's always the added danger that the activity in the water will attract sharks. Turtle meat is regarded as a luxury in many parts of the world. Sweet and tasty, I found it more tender than beef. The Aborigines either throw the meat onto the coals or boil it in a billy. Even after the meat has been removed, the shell is not discarded. It's placed on the glowing embers to produce one of my favorite meals, genuine turtle soup. As the fire warms the shell, the juices run from the remaining fat, collecting in the shell base. It's not quite your gourmet restaurant with silver dishes and spoons, but the soup's the real thing. After tea, I try my luck at the water's edge. Before long, I've hooked a shark, and the fight's on. As another warm, dry season day draws to a close, Kim and Namya settle down to sleep early, while Woolagudja, Tom and I linger by the fire to yarn and reminisce. Woolagudja talks about his tribal guardian spirits, the Wandjina, whom he believes still live among us, influencing our movements and guiding us when we hunt. Woolagudja has been anxious for us to see his Wandjina. So I decide to grasp this rare opportunity, and we make the journey the following morning. And we're lucky. The morning is cool and the sea calm. We make good time as we head for the Australian mainland. Jowdy, suffering from seasickness, has a miserable ride, but old Woolagudja is elated. For him, this will be an inspiring day. At the entrance to Doubtful Bay, the rugged and forbidding Steep Island rises sheer from the sea, a giant sentinel guarding this ancient coast. The high escarpment beckons as we begin the arduous ascent to the cave where for generations Aborigines have camped and worshipped their spirits, the Wandjinas. The walls and roof of the cave contain a gallery of priceless art. When we reach the cave, hidden high in the cliff, we keep well back as Woolagudja reverently prepares to repaint the images. Today, there are few Aborigines whose status in the tribe gives them the authority to perform these rites. It's a moving scene as the old man touches the images, perhaps for the last time. No other Aboriginal art has created such worldwide interest and controversy, yet few Europeans have seen the Wandjinas. Journalists often ask the question, are these mystery paintings pictures of beings from outer space? This kind of sensationalism appeals to the public imagination, but it's never supported by fact or proof. The Aborigines believe that during the dream time, the Wandjinas were the first humans who wandered the earth, creating the landscape and its flora and fauna as we know it today. Eventually, their gargantuan task complete, they entered the many caves and died, leaving on the walls their images, like these that Woolagudja is now restoring. Although the original Wandjinas are dead, their spirits live on and still dictate all aspects of tribal life. The old people believe that if the Wandjinas are neglected, they'll be offended and cause the extinction of the tribe. Sadly, this prophecy is coming true in the Kimberley today. After the awesome experience of seeing the Wandjinas for the first time, Namya is off hunting. He spots a turtle well below the surface and drives the harpoon deep. One of the trials of manhood in the Badi tribe is the single-handed capture of a large turtle, and Namya is determined to succeed before he returns to his family. Never has he felt so exhilarated and proud. This is the first time that he's speared such a prize. As we head back to camp, Woolagudja too is well pleased. It's been a good day. Wandjina has been watching over us, he chuckles. Back on our island, Tom butchers the turtle for tea. The long intestinal track is Woolagudja's favourite portion. The tripe, either boiled or dried in the sun, is definitely an acquired taste. For the first time since our arrival, Woolagudja is at peace. It's been a long day for the old man, but he's been rewarded, for he's spoken with Wandjina again. The spirit has been appeased, the proper tribal ritual observed, according to the timeless religion of his tribe. Several times a year, under the cover of darkness, the large female turtle drags herself from the sea and struggles up the sandy beach to lay her eggs. Using her powerful front flippers, a wide depression is scooped out in the dry top sand. When she's satisfied that this is deep enough, she patiently excavates a small second hole using her dexterous rear flippers. The maneuver is always the same, an instinct refined by nature to ensure the survival of the species. If the hole caves in, she'll move to another area and start all over again. I've seen a turtle spend the entire night digging holes without successfully completing one. Up to 100 eggs are laid. Once she actually begins laying, she's oblivious to everything around her and will not stop. Tom takes advantage of this to collect some really fresh eggs. In many parts of the world, turtles have been almost exterminated. Fortunately, in North Australia, there are still countless thousands, and today there are few Aborigines left who hunt them regularly for food. In fact, it's possible that there are now more turtles in Australian waters than ever before. As soon as she's finished laying, she fills in the hole, almost as arduous a task as the digging. About 2 months later, the hatching young struggle to the surface and head instinctively for the sea. Those lucky enough to emerge at night have a good chance of reaching the water. Most of those making their dash by day are quickly devoured by the voracious seagulls. Beyond the line of breakers, the adult turtles mill around mating. The Aborigines call this married turtle time, and it's always been an important hunting season for the coastal tribes. The turtles, less wary than usual, are an easy target. In the old days, it was a time of great feasting for the Aborigines with an abundance of fresh meat. One of my reasons for making the trip is to fish in waters where perhaps no one else has ever been. I have a whole range of lures and spinners because so many are lost on the coral outcrops as we constantly try out new areas through the reefs. As a backup to the store-bought lures, I have my favorite homemade models. From past experience, I've found these quick and easy to make from red and yellow raffia. I rig up 2 long mangrove poles from each side of the boat and suspend several lures from each one. Right, let's get going. To begin with, we try a few short rigs well away from the white water behind the motor. This surface popper is just a bit of broom handle with a hook attached. It's not long before the fish strike and the excitement mounts. A good-sized trevally has taken my homemade lure. It's too early and too hot to keep our first catches, and we're expecting plenty more. Suddenly, two trevally hit together. It's a fisherman's dream, and they keep on striking, proving my theory that the surface popping action simulates a small garfish or long tom skipping across the water and encourages the bigger fish to attack. Not a bad way to spend a day. Motor throbbing, calm seas, glorious weather, and a trolling line in hand, waiting for that big strike. Kim lands a nice mackerel on the red raffia again. This is the most successful colour in the north. And this one comes over on a red Smith jig. We've let out the really long trolling lines, hoping for the bigger fish that'll not come in close to the boat. At last, my perseverance is rewarded. It's a beauty. Over 20 kilos of fighting trevally. Every picture tells a story. Our main competition is the gannets. Time and again they spoil our fishing, bombarding the lures, forcing us to quit for the day. With as much dignity as it can muster, it takes its ruffled feathers overboard. Although trolling gives us the spectacular results, it's far more exhilarating to fish for the big ones with a light rod and reel. This is fishing at its most exciting. With a small reel and a very light rod, I want to try out this saltwater fly, an exciting new experience in sea fishing. The trevally tries desperately to throw the hook, and I really have to work to get him alongside. I use the net to land him because the small hook might bend or break free with the much heavier weight of the fish. There's nothing more enjoyable than a visit to a deserted beach after a solid day's fishing, to roast the pick of the catch on the coals. We never tire of eating fish this way, fresh and juicy. Some years ago, when I first explored the Kimberley coast, I was constantly overwhelmed by its brilliant colours and the immense grandeur of the scenery. So, after a long spell of fishing, I promised to show Kim one of the incredible natural phenomena. The tidal gorge into the hinterlands of Talbot Bay. A place so wild and so isolated that few people know of it or would dare to venture inside. During the few minutes of slack water when the tide changes, I can motor through a narrow gap in the cliff face and scramble onto a ledge to film the most spectacular natural wonder that I've ever seen. This incredible surge comes from the massive push of the racing, rising tide. Kim has waited outside until the tide is really belting through. Now he shoots these rare saltwater rapids. When Kim is safely through, we climb to a higher ledge as the roar of the tide builds to an almost deafening crescendo. A feasibility study concluded that in the future, enormous supplies of electricity could be produced here using the power of the tides. Finally, to add to the thrill, I tackle the explosive water. I make my first run to see how dangerous it is. And then I motor as far as possible into the narrow opening until the sea becomes too turbulent and too powerful to continue. This is one of the most breathtaking spectacles I've seen in all my years traveling Australia. Once the tide changes again, the seas settle, and we make the long journey back to our island. The weeks have flown by, and Woolagudja says it's time to leave, for he's anxious to see his family again. The old tribesman is satisfied. His fish and turtle have dried well in the sun. He has provided for his family. Swags are rolled and we load the boat to leave the reef for the last time on the dropping tide. Woolagudja, one of the last of the great Wurrura tribesmen, continues to instruct Namya even as we leave the hunting grounds. After the long voyage back along the coast, we reach the small mining community on Cockatoo Island, and the 20th century takes control of our lives once more, as sadly Woolagudja and I part company. The old man is returning to his family in the town. He knows that he's growing old and frail. Never again will he visit his Wandjina or journey to his beloved country